In the heart of Willow Creek Estates, a gated community known for its manicured lawns and quiet streets, life seemed almost too perfect. The neighborhood was filled with families who cherished the sense of safety that came with living behind locked gates. Children rode their bikes down tree-lined roads, retirees strolled through the parks, and everyone followed the strict guidelines set by the Homeowners Association to keep the area pristine. For Sarah Thompson, a hard-working single mother, this place felt like the ideal spot to raise her teenage daughter, Emma. After years of moving from one city to another due to work demands, Sarah finally hoped they could put down roots in a stable environment. Emma, now 16, was an intelligent and reserved girl who often kept to herself. To her classmates, she was just another student excelling in math and science, blending seamlessly into the background. But what no one, not even most of their neighbors, knew was that Emma led a double life. By day, she attended high school, aced exams, and helped her mom around the house. By night, or whenever duty called, she transformed into one of the youngest tactical commanders in the FBI's elite hostage rescue team. Her extraordinary career was born out of exceptional talent and rigorous training, but it remained a closely guarded secret. Only Sarah knew the full extent of Emma's responsibilities, and they had agreed long ago to keep it hidden to protect both their privacy and Emma's safety. Willow Creek Estates appeared idyllic on the surface, but beneath its polished exterior lay simmering tensions. The HOA prided itself on maintaining order, and their private security team enforced rules with military-like precision. Residents were expected to adhere to strict guidelines about everything from lawn care to parking, and any deviation invited swift reprimands. Over time, some neighbors grew frustrated with the heavy-handed approach, feeling more controlled than protected. Still, few dared to speak up, fearing backlash or fines. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma decided to take a walk. She needed a break from studying and figured the cool air would help clear her mind. Dressed casually in jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie, she slipped out of the house without drawing much attention. Her phone and keys were tucked safely into her pocket, and she carried nothing else. As she strolled along the familiar streets, she noticed how peaceful everything seemed. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the occasional chirping of crickets. But peace can be deceptive. When Emma reached the entrance gate, she found Carl, one of the HOA security guards, standing at his post. Carl was notorious for being overly zealous about enforcing the rules. He scrutinized every car that entered, questioned visitors relentlessly, and rarely cracked a smile. Tonight, however, something seemed different. Instead of simply nodding as residents passed by, Carl stepped forward, blocking Emma's path. His expression was stern, and his tone was accusatory as he demanded to know why she was loitering suspiciously near the gate. Confused but calm, Emma explained that she lived in the neighborhood and was simply taking a walk. Carl, unconvinced, pressed her for identification. What started as a routine encounter quickly took a turn when Carl's demeanor shifted from skeptical to aggressive. Neighbors began peeking out of their windows, curious about the commotion. Little did anyone realize, this seemingly ordinary night was about to reveal extraordinary truths and test the limits of trust within the tight-knit community. As Carl blocked Emma's path near the entrance gate, his demeanor grew increasingly confrontational. His arms were crossed, and his face was set in a deep scowl that made him look more intimidating than usual. For a moment, Emma simply stood there, trying to process what was happening. She had walked this route dozens of times before without incident, so why was Carl acting as if she were some kind of intruder? "I already told you," Emma said firmly but politely, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I live here. I'm just taking a walk." Her tone carried a quiet confidence, the same one she used during high-pressure situations at work. But Carl didn't seem impressed. If anything, her calmness only seemed to irritate him further. "Taking a walk," Carl repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. At this time of night, near the gate. Don't give me that nonsense. People have reported seeing strangers hanging around here lately, and you fit the description. Emma blinked in disbelief. Strangers. Description. She glanced down at herself. Jeans, sneakers, a hoodie, and couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. Was she really being accused of something because of how she dressed, or where she chose to walk? Before she could respond, Carl took a step closer, invading her personal space. His posture was aggressive, and his hand hovered dangerously close to the holster strapped to his belt. The situation was escalating far too quickly for Emma's liking. Normally, she would have handled such a confrontation with ease, relying on her training to de-escalate tensions. But this wasn't a hostage situation or a covert operation. It was her own neighborhood. She hadn't expected to need her tactical skills here, of all places. Still, her instincts kicked in. She kept her hands visible, palms open, signaling that she posed no threat. Her mind raced, calculating every possible move Carl might make next and preparing herself for any outcome. "You don't understand." Emma tried again, her voice firmer now. "This is ridiculous. I've lived here for over a year. Ask anyone. I'm not a stranger." But Carl wasn't listening. Instead, he barked back. "Prove it. Show me some ID, or I'll have to take action." His words hung heavy in the air, and the underlying threat was impossible to ignore. Take action. What exactly did that mean? Emma felt her pulse quicken, though outwardly she remained composed. This was the part of her job she hated most, the unpredictability of human behavior. In her line of work, she dealt with people who were often scared, angry, or irrational. Yet here she was, facing similar emotions from someone who was supposed to protect the community, not intimidate its residents. By now, a small crowd had begun to gather. Neighbors peered out from behind curtains or stepped cautiously onto their porches, curious about the commotion. Some recognized Emma immediately. After all, she attended the local high school and occasionally babysat for families in the area. Others weren't sure what to think. A few even pulled out their phones to record the scene, unsure whether they were witnessing an act of vigilance or outright harassment. "Why are you doing this?" Emma asked, her frustration beginning to show. "What exactly do you think I'm going to do? I'm standing here talking to you, unarmed, minding my own business. Isn't that enough proof that I'm not a threat?" Carl sneered, clearly uninterested in reasoning. "Don't tell me how to do my job, kid. You either show me your ID, or I call the cops. Your choice." Emma hesitated, weighing her options. She could easily end the argument by providing identification, but something inside her resisted. Why should she have to prove her innocence when she hadn't done anything wrong? And more importantly, why was Carl treating her like a criminal instead of a neighbor? The injustice of the situation burned in her chest, but she knew better than to let her emotions get the best of her. Losing control now would only make things worse. Just as Emma opened her mouth to respond, Carl reached for his holster. The metallic click of the safety catch echoed through the evening air, freezing everyone in place, including Emma. Time seemed to slow as Carl drew his weapon, pointing it directly at her. Gasps rippled through the growing crowd, and someone shouted, "What are you doing? Put the gun away." For a split second, Emma locked eyes with Carl, searching for any sign of hesitation or remorse. There was none. Whatever had driven him to this point, whatever fears or biases fueled his actions, he was fully committed to his course. And Emma realized, with chilling clarity, that she was now facing a dangerous standoff, not as a teenage girl taking a walk, but as a trained FBI tactical commander ready to handle whatever came next. The moment Carl pointed his gun at Emma, the atmosphere shifted from tense to terrifying. Neighbors who had been watching curiously now froze in shock, their faces pale with disbelief. Some whispered urgently to each other, while others stood rooted to the spot, unsure of what to do or say. The casual evening stroll that Emma had embarked on just minutes earlier had spiraled into something no one could have anticipated. a confrontation involving a weapon and a young girl caught in the crosshairs. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't let fear take over. Years of training kicked in almost instinctively, sharpening her focus and steadying her nerves. She raised her hands slightly higher, keeping them visible and non-threatening. Her movements were deliberate, slow, and calm, ensuring Carl wouldn't misinterpret anything as hostile. Despite the gravity of the situation, her mind remained clear, analyzing every detail. The way Carl gripped the gun, the tension in his posture, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Listen to me," Emma said, her voice firm but measured. "You don't want to do this. I live here. I'm not a threat. Lower your weapon, and we can sort this out." But Carl's finger hovered dangerously close to the trigger, and his expression hardened even further. "Don't try to tell me what I should or shouldn't do," he snapped back, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and anxiety. "I've seen people like you before, thinking they can get away with breaking the rules. Not on my watch." Emma clenched her jaw, biting back a retort. People like you. What did that even mean? Was it because she was young? Because she dressed casually? Or was there something else beneath the surface driving Carl's hostility? Whatever it was, she knew arguing wouldn't help. Instead, she focused on de-escalating the situation, speaking softly but confidently. "I'm not trying to break any rules," she replied. "I'm telling you the truth. If you need proof, I can call my mom. She'll confirm everything." Carl scoffed, clearly unconvinced. "Your mom? Oh sure, that'll solve everything," he muttered sarcastically. He glanced around nervously, perhaps realizing how many neighbors were now witnessing the scene unfold. His pride seemed to be getting the better of him, making him dig in his heels instead of backing down. Meanwhile, the crowd continued to grow. Phones flashed as videos were recorded, capturing every word and movement. A few brave souls stepped forward, attempting to intervene. One woman shouted, "Carl, put the gun down. This is ridiculous." Another man added, "She's just a kid. You're overreacting." But Carl ignored them all, his attention locked solely on Emma. To him, it felt like everyone was ganging up against him, questioning his authority. His grip tightened on the weapon, and for a brief, horrifying moment, Emma wondered if he might actually pull the trigger. Would he really shoot an unarmed teenager over a misunderstanding at the gate? It seemed unthinkable, yet the possibility loomed large enough to keep her alert. Out of the corner of her eye, Emma noticed someone running toward the scene, a familiar figure. It was her mother, Sarah, who must have heard the commotion from their house nearby. Relief washed over Emma, but only for a second. As much as she appreciated her mom's arrival, she worried about what might happen next. Would Sarah's presence calm Carl down, or would it make things worse? Sarah skidded to a stop beside Emma, her face etched with panic and fury. "What is going on here?" she demanded, glancing between Carl and the gun still aimed at her daughter. "Why are you pointing a weapon at my child?" Carl hesitated, caught off guard by Sarah's sudden appearance. For the first time since the confrontation began, doubt flickered across his face, but he quickly masked it with defiance, snapping back, "Ma'am, I'm doing my job. Your daughter refuses to show ID, and I have reason to believe she doesn't belong here." Sarah stared at him incredulously, then turned to Emma. "Honey, did you tell them who you are?" "Yes, Mom," Emma answered quietly, never taking her eyes off Carl. "He won't listen." Sarah exhaled sharply, visibly struggling to keep her emotions in check. She looked back at Carl, her voice rising with urgency. "Do you realize what you're doing? My daughter lives here. She's part of this community. And if you don't lower that gun right now, you're going to regret it." Carl blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by Sarah's words. Regret it? What did she mean? Before he could ask, Emma spoke up again, her tone sharper this time. "Mr. Carl, I understand you're trying to protect the neighborhood, but you're making a huge mistake. Trust me when I say you don't want to escalate this any further." Her words carried a weight that couldn't be ignored, though Carl wasn't ready to admit it. Sarah's words hung in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and charged with implications. Carl shifted uncomfortably, his grip on the gun faltering slightly as doubt began to creep into his mind. He glanced between Sarah and Emma, trying to gauge whether they were bluffing or if there was more to their confidence than met the eye. The crowd murmured around them, some shouting encouragement for Sarah, while others whispered nervously about what might happen next. "Regret it," Carl finally repeated, his voice tinged with skepticism, but also a hint of unease. "What are you talking about? I'm enforcing the rules here. If your daughter has nothing to hide, why won't she just show me her ID?" Emma took a deep breath, her patience wearing thin, but her composure unshaken. She knew this moment required finesse. Revealing too much could put her in an even more complicated position, but staying silent wasn't helping either. Her training had taught her that sometimes the best way to diffuse a situation is to shift the power dynamic subtly. And right now, Carl needed to realize he was dealing with someone far beyond his expectations. "Because I shouldn't have to prove my identity when I'm standing in my own neighborhood," Emma replied evenly, locking eyes with Carl. Then, after a deliberate pause, she added, "But if you really need proof, fine. Call the police, or better yet." She reached into her pocket slowly, pulling out her phone. "Let me call someone who can verify everything." Carl frowned, clearly suspicious. "Who are you calling? Some friend pretending to be your mom won't cut it." Emma didn't respond immediately. Instead, she dialed a number from memory, holding the phone up so Carl could see the screen. As the line connected, she spoke clearly. "This is Tactical Commander Emma Thompson. Badge number 47,293. I need verification support at Willow Creek Estates ASAP." The silence that followed was deafening. Carl blinked rapidly, his jaw slackening as he processed what he'd just heard. Tactical Commander. Badge number. The pieces clicked together in his mind, but before he could react, the person on the other end of the line confirmed Emma's credentials. "Commander Thompson, we're patching you through to local field agents immediately. Stand by." Emma lowered the phone, meeting Carl's stunned gaze. "Does that answer your question?" she asked coolly, her tone leaving no room for argument. For a few seconds, Carl stood frozen, his weapon still half raised. The crowd erupted into gasps and whispers, the reality of the situation sinking in. One neighbor exclaimed, "Wait, she's FBI." Another muttered, "No wonder she's so calm." Even Sarah looked momentarily taken aback, though she quickly masked her surprise with pride. Carl's face flushed red, embarrassment mixing with panic. His bravado crumbled under the weight of the truth. I didn't know," he stammered, lowering the gun awkwardly. "You should have said something sooner." Emma arched an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "You never gave me the chance," she pointed out. "And honestly, I shouldn't have to justify myself to you, or anyone else, when I'm not doing anything wrong." Before Carl could respond, the distant wail of sirens pierced the night air. Within moments, 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt near the gate, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows across the scene. Federal agents poured out, moving with precision as they assessed the situation. One of them approached Emma, asking tersely, "Are you okay, Commander?" "I'm fine," Emma assured him, her voice steady. She gestured toward Carl. "But this man pulled a firearm on me without cause. I think that needs to be addressed." The agent nodded grimly, turning his attention to Carl. "Sir, please place your weapon on the ground and step back. We'll need to take a full statement from you." Carl obeyed reluctantly, his hands trembling as he set the gun down. Humiliation radiated off him as the agents surrounded him, asking questions and taking notes. Meanwhile, the crowd buzzed with excitement and disbelief. Some neighbors applauded softly, relieved that the situation hadn't ended tragically. Others exchanged concerned glances, wondering how such a misunderstanding could escalate so dangerously. Sarah stepped closer to Emma, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Are you really okay?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Emma nodded, offering a small smile. "Yeah, Mom. I've handled worse. But I think it's safe to say our quiet life in Willow Creek just got a lot less boring." As the agents escorted Carl away for further questioning, the neighborhood collectively exhaled. What had started as a routine evening walk had turned into a dramatic. As the federal agents surrounded Carl, the gravity of the situation began to sink in, not just for him, but for everyone watching. The once bustling crowd fell eerily silent, save for the occasional murmur or gasp as neighbors processed what had just unfolded. Here was a man who had been entrusted with protecting their community, yet he had drawn a weapon on an unarmed teenager. A teenager who turned out to be one of the FBI's youngest tactical commanders. It was almost too surreal to comprehend. Emma stood quietly beside her mother, her expression calm but unreadable. She wasn't gloating or seeking revenge. Instead, she exuded a quiet authority that commanded respect. When one of the agents asked if she wanted to press charges against Carl, she simply replied, "Let's focus on understanding why this happened. I don't think anyone benefits from making this personal." Her words carried weight, not only because of her position, but also because of the maturity behind them. Even Sarah seemed surprised by Emma's restraint, though she quickly nodded in agreement. "We just want answers," Sarah added firmly, her protective instincts still simmering beneath the surface. "And we need to make sure something like this never happens again." Meanwhile, Carl looked utterly defeated. His earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by shame and fear as the agents guided him toward one of the SUVs. Several neighbors tried to intervene, shouting questions at the agents or defending Carl's actions, but they were met with firm reminders to stay back and let the investigation proceed. One woman stepped forward, visibly upset. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed. "He was just doing his job." "Doing his job?" Another neighbor shot back, incredulous. "Pointing a gun at a kid isn't doing your job. That's reckless and dangerous." The argument escalated quickly, with voices rising and tempers flaring. Some residents defended Carl, insisting he was overworked and underappreciated, while others condemned his actions as unacceptable. The divide within the community became painfully clear, highlighting long-simmering frustrations about the HOA's strict enforcement policies. For years, people had grumbled privately about the security team's heavy-handed tactics, but now those complaints were spilling into public view and being recorded for all to see. Amid the chaos, Emma remained a steady presence. She didn't join the heated debate or engage with the crowd. Instead, she watched silently, observing how quickly fear and anger could spiral out of control. These were the same dynamics she dealt with during high-stakes operations, where emotions often clouded judgment and led to disastrous outcomes. But here, in her own neighborhood, it felt different. More personal, more jarring. Eventually, the agents managed to restore some semblance of order, urging everyone to return to their homes while they conducted their investigation. As the crowd dispersed reluctantly, several neighbors approached Emma and Sarah, offering apologies and expressions of support. "I'm so sorry this happened," one man said sincerely. "You didn't deserve to be treated like that." Another woman added, "If there's anything we can do, please let us know. This shouldn't have gone this far." Emma thanked them politely, appreciating their kindness but knowing that apologies wouldn't erase what had transpired. Still, their gestures gave her hope that maybe, just maybe, the community could learn from this incident and grow stronger as a result. Later that night, as the commotion finally died down and the last SUV drove away, Emma and Sarah walked back home together. The streets were eerily quiet now, the tension lingering in the air like a storm that had yet to fully pass. Sarah glanced at her daughter, pride mingling with concern in her eyes. "You handled that incredibly well," she said softly. "But are you okay? Really?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, "I'm fine," she admitted. "It's just weird, you know. I've faced worse situations at work, but this was different. This was supposed to be home." Sarah sighed, wrapping an arm around Emma's shoulders. "It still is home. Things will settle down eventually. People will realize how serious this is, and changes will come. But tonight, we take care of ourselves. No more worrying about Carl or the HOA or any of that. Just us." As they reached their front door, Emma allowed herself a small smile. Despite everything, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, her secret life had been exposed. And yes, the quiet sanctuary of Willow Creek Estates had been shaken. But perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. After all, sometimes cracks needed to form before true healing could begin. And as Emma stepped inside, ready to face whatever came next, she knew she'd done what she always did best: kept her cool, stayed true to herself, and turned a tense moment into an opportunity for growth, for herself and for her community. The days following the incident at Willow Creek Estates were anything but quiet. News of the confrontation spread like wildfire, not only through the neighborhood, but also beyond its gates. Local reporters caught wind of the story and descended on the community, eager to uncover details about the teenage FBI tactical commander who had faced off against an armed security guard. Emma's name became a buzzword overnight, sparking curiosity, admiration, and even skepticism among those who heard it. For Sarah, the sudden attention was overwhelming. She had always been fiercely protective of Emma's privacy, knowing how dangerous it could be for someone in her line of work to have their identity exposed. Now that carefully guarded secret was out in the open, leaving both mother and daughter vulnerable to scrutiny. Reporters camped outside their home, knocking on doors and asking intrusive questions. Neighbors, once friendly but distant, suddenly wanted to know everything about Emma: how she balanced school with such a demanding career, what mission she had been on, and whether they should feel safer or more alarmed having her nearby. At first, Sarah tried to shield Emma from the chaos, turning away reporters and politely declining interviews. But Emma, ever pragmatic, knew avoiding the spotlight wouldn't make it go away. Instead, she suggested a different approach: use the moment to send a message. "Mom," she said one evening as they sat together in the living room, "people are going to talk no matter what we do. Maybe we can turn this into something positive. A chance to show everyone why trust and communication matter." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. The next day, Emma addressed the media alongside a representative from the FBI, speaking briefly about the importance of respecting boundaries and de-escalation in tense situations. Her words were measured and thoughtful, emphasizing the need for mutual understanding rather than fear or hostility. "I'm proud of my work," she told the gathered crowd, "but I'm also a person, just like anyone else in this neighborhood. All I want is to live here peacefully without being treated like a threat." Her statement resonated deeply, earning praise from many residents and even some critics. Slowly, the tide began to shift within Willow Creek Estates. The HOA board, under immense pressure from both the public and federal authorities, launched an internal review of their security practices. Carl resigned shortly after the investigation concluded, citing stress and regret over his actions. In his place, the HOA hired new personnel with better training in conflict resolution and community policing. But the changes went beyond staffing adjustments. Residents started attending town hall meetings in record numbers, voicing concerns and proposing reforms to ensure nothing like this would happen again. Some suggested implementing stricter oversight of the security team, while others advocated for fostering stronger relationships between neighbors. A few even proposed hosting workshops on recognizing implicit biases and improving communication skills. Through it all, Emma remained a quiet but influential figure in the community. Though she avoided the limelight whenever possible, her presence inspired others to reflect on their own behaviors and assumptions. One neighbor, Mrs. Patel, organized a small gathering to thank Emma for handling the situation with grace and professionalism. "You taught us all a lesson we won't forget," she said warmly, handing Emma a homemade card signed by dozens of residents. "We're lucky to have you here." Despite the newfound respect and appreciation, Emma couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. While the immediate crisis had passed, she knew her life would never quite return to normal. Strangers now recognized her when she walked to school or visited the grocery store, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Still, she reminded herself that change often came with sacrifice, and if her experience could lead to a safer, more compassionate neighborhood, then perhaps it was worth it. As weeks turned into months, Willow Creek Estates began to heal. The scars of that fateful night remained, but so did the lessons learned. For Emma, the ordeal reinforced the delicate balance she had to maintain between her two worlds. And for the community, it served as a powerful reminder that heroes sometimes lived right next door. You just had to look closely enough to see them. Months after the incident at Willow Creek Estates, life in the neighborhood began to settle into a new rhythm. The initial shock and chaos had faded, replaced by a quiet determination to rebuild trust and strengthen the bonds within the community. For Emma Thompson, the changes were both subtle and profound. Though her secret life as an FBI tactical commander was no longer a secret, she found solace in the fact that her story had sparked meaningful conversations about safety, respect, and accountability. The HOA implemented sweeping reforms to ensure that security personnel were better trained and more accountable. Background checks became mandatory for all hires, and de-escalation training was added to their curriculum. Residents now had direct access to a hotline where they could report concerns or commend officers for good behavior, a step toward transparency that many appreciated. More importantly, the gates of Willow Creek Estates no longer felt like barriers separating us from them. Instead, they symbolized a shared commitment to protecting everyone who called the neighborhood home. Emma's role in the community evolved too. Once seen as just another teenager blending into the background, she was now regarded with a mix of admiration and gratitude. Neighbors often approached her to share stories of how her courage had inspired them to speak up about issues they'd previously ignored. Some even confided in her, seeking advice on handling conflicts peacefully or standing firm in difficult situations. Emma listened patiently, offering guidance when asked, but always reminding people that she was still learning herself. At school, things changed in unexpected ways. Classmates who had barely noticed her before suddenly wanted to sit with her at lunch or work with her on group projects. Teachers praised her resilience and leadership, holding her up as an example of someone who balanced extraordinary responsibilities with humility. At first, Emma felt uncomfortable being in the spotlight, but over time, she came to see it as an opportunity to encourage others. "You don't have to be perfect," she told a group of students during a career day presentation. "You just have to care enough to try, and to keep going, even when things get tough." Sarah watched these transformations with pride, though she never stopped worrying about her daughter. The media attention eventually died down, but she knew the risks of Emma's double life hadn't disappeared. Still, seeing how much strength Emma drew from the support of their neighbors gave her hope. Together, they navigated the challenges, finding comfort in the knowledge that they weren't alone anymore. One crisp spring morning, as Emma walked through the neighborhood, she noticed something remarkable. Where once there had been tension and division, there was now warmth and connection. Children played together without fear, retirees chatted freely with younger residents, and families hosted block parties to celebrate milestones big and small. Even the security guards smiled more often, striking up friendly conversations instead of enforcing rules with iron fists. As Emma passed the entrance gate, the very spot where everything had unfolded months earlier, she paused for a moment. She thought about Carl, whose actions had set off a chain reaction neither of them could have predicted. While she didn't harbor resentment toward him, she understood that his mistakes had served as a catalyst for change. It was a reminder that growth often emerged from discomfort, and that sometimes the hardest moments led to the greatest breakthroughs. When Sarah joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa, she noticed the thoughtful look on Emma's face. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, handing one cup to her daughter. Emma smiled softly, taking the sip before responding. I was thinking about how far we've come since that night. Things aren't perfect, but they're better. And maybe that's all we can ask for. Sarah nodded, squeezing Emma's shoulder gently. Better is good. Better means progress. And I think we owe a lot of that to you. Emma shook her head, modest as ever. Not me, Mom. All of us. Everyone here played a part in making this place feel like home again. And for the first time in a long while, Emma truly believed it. Willow Creek Estates wasn't just a gated community. It was a tapestry woven from diverse lives, experiences, and choices. Through adversity, its residents had discovered what it meant to stand together, not as strangers behind walls, but as neighbors committed to building something stronger. As mother and daughter strolled back home, the sun casting golden light across the streets, Emma felt a deep sense of peace. Life would always bring challenges, but she knew she wasn't facing them alone. In Willow Creek Estates, or wherever her journey took her next, she carried not only her own strength, but also the lessons and love of those around her. And that, she realized, was the true measure of a hero.